Let's talk about Odegaard. So for me, with Odegaard, for me, it feels like the guy's got, he's got a taste for goals. The scoring goals changes you, man. That's just it. Scored 15 goals last season. This season, he already has 2 goals in 4 games already. It's gonna change once you start scoring goals. Is not, you get that taste, and you don't want to change. It happened to Fabregas. It happened to Ramsey. Once they started scoring a bunch of goals already, they wanted to start moving forward rather than being deeper. Even if they started from deep, they will position themselves high up the pitch, making runs into the box and things like that. It completely changes you as a player when you score goals. There's different kind of accolades that you get as a player. And I feel like you look at the season already. Odegaard, like I said, already has 2 goals in 4 games already. I saw his shot map for Norway against Georgia, and he was shooting from every angle. This season, you can see him already just constantly shooting. Like trying to get goals from any situation. So for me, that's already changing because the thing is, when Havertz first came, I thought that Havertz being like a second striker, I thought he would be the one who'd be getting closer to Gabriel Jesus, like kind of like a 4-4-2, and then Odegaard would be the one who would be dropping deeper next to Declan Rice, almost becoming that 8 that our fans want us to get. The guy who can offer himself in the build-up in the first phase, in the second phase, help us to progress the ball, whilst be the guy sitting next to Rice to build the ball at the back like a centre mid. I thought that would be what Odegaard would then become. He would be that player that we were looking to sign. However, what's now actually happened is that Odegaard is actually, rather than becoming more of a centre mid and dropping deeper, he's actually moving forward and becoming more offensive, becoming more direct, and becoming more of a goal scorer. So that for me already, I feel like kind of has an effect on Havertz because obviously if you feel like Havertz is gonna be the one who's gonna become more the second striker, that he can't really play that role like that when Odegaard is also wanting to play that role the same way as well, you see. So we have to find a balance somewhere, and I feel like we are kind of sort of finding the balance because defensively we're not defending on 4-4-2. Instead, we're defending on 4-1-4-1, where both Havertz and Odegaard are actually being asked to drop deeper next to Declan Rice, either side of him, and we defend depending on what side the ball is in. So yeah, and I feel like once a player is starting to score goals like that, I think it was even Wenger who said this before, is like you don't get in the way of a player's development. Whenever you see a player who's starting to develop in a way that's positive, there's no point trying to stifle them or anything like that. Just allow them to grow into that position and become the player that they want to be. And I feel like that's what's happening with Odegaard right now because initially when I thought he was going to be developing more into more of a playmaker or like a deep playmaker kind of thing, he's becoming more of a direct player, which is what we're actually asking for him last season when we were saying we wanted him to be more direct, like Bruno, like Kevin De Bruyne, guys like that who are more direct attacking midfielders. Now we're starting to see that from Odegaard. And what's great about him is that he's actually been able to find the right balance between being a playmaker and being a direct guy, because even though he's been direct and scoring all these goals, he's still creating a lot of chances. He still drops back to help us to build up play in the first phase, in the second phase mainly. Still drops back to help us build up. So he's never really like completely given up on the midfielder, just left there and just stuck in the final third. He's actually been more of an all-round player. So I'm liking the development from Odegaard, and I feel like I mean, especially now that he's been nominated for the Ballon d'Or as well, and all the praise that he's getting now, there's no way you're going to be able to convince him to be a different kind of player and to be someone who's not going to be chasing goals. I feel like that's out the window now. That's where he's going to be. The other thing I wanted to talk about again is you do think about, like, when I start thinking about situations like that, I do look at players like before, like Iniesta, Dembele, Jack Wilshere, all these kind of guys, and I look around and I feel like there aren't too many of these type of players, even in the Premier League right now at the top clubs. The only one who's off that ilk sort of is like Kovacic, like that dribbling midfielder who's not really a goal scorer, not really a final ball guy, but a guy who's more of someone who's like just dribbling, disorganizing teams with his dribbling, causing chaos in the middle of the pitch, carrying the ball at the back from back to front, stuff like that. We're not really seeing a lot of them kind of players, and I feel like the players who are getting more of the hype are the ones who are bringing goals. So like goals now and numbers is the main hype for midfielders all around. So I feel like you can even that already is going to play in the mind of a midfielder like Odegaard. He's thinking like, I wasn't getting this much hype when I wasn't scoring goals. I was just being seen as like a playmaker that can get assists. But now I score a few goals and everyone is, they're nominating me for Ballon d'Or, they're nominating me for Player of the Year and all this sort of things. How would you be able to convince Odegaard to play any differently? You can't, Once you give a guy this much hype for this sort of thing, that's completely gone. And I feel like that's probably the reason why we're not seeing too many of this style of players anyways. But that's a completely different topic in itself anyways. But yeah, I see Odegaard though as kind of like a mix. of like Ozil, De Bruyne, where still got that playmaking, that midfield, that key. When I say playmaking, I mean like not just the final action, it's like in the midfield, you're dictating the game, controlling the game, dropping deep to help your team progress the ball and things like that, dictating the ball in the final third, making sure you're making the right passes to sustain pressure in the final third. Odegaard is still giving us all these things, but at the same time, he's now even more direct again, which is what De Bruyne is, giving us that direct action at the same time as the playmaking. So for me, that's already something that that's been a positive development for Odegaard anyways. And I do feel like for this to work anyways, whereby we're playing with two attacking mids either sides of Rice. For this to work, you need to have a defensive midfielder like Declan Rice. And for me, that's why Declan Rice is so important, and why we're even looking at these kind of players who are going for like 100 mils, is because if you're going to play with two very offensive attacking midfielders, you need a very strong defensive player who is very mobile and able to deal with this kind of isolated situation, who can defend in isolation. And Partey is getting older. He's not going to have the legs to be able to do that. But Declan Rice has the legs. He's got the mobility. He's got the engine. He's got the fitness. And he's got the defensive awareness to be able to win these duels when he's by himself in isolation. So I feel like Declan Rice is very important for this. Another player who's also very important for this is Zinchenko. Because if you're going to play with two tens in the final third who are constantly attacking the box and waiting in the final third to receive so they can attack, you need to have players at the back that can actually get the ball into the final third. And when you've got someone like Zinchenko, who's literally basically a midfielder who can build a play and carry the ball into the final third and progress the ball and stuff like that, when you literally have a guy like that, it makes the job very easy, because then he just gets into midfield. So rather than having Odegaard or Havertz to drop into midfield, instead you have Zinchenko push into midfield from the back. That's why Zinchenko is so important to this. He will push into midfield from the back to help us build a play and progress the ball and get the ball into the final third. So that's why I feel like Zinchenko and Declan Rice are very important and very key players to this system working of having two tens in the final third. But yeah, man, I feel like that's literally the main key things in terms of like Odegaard's progression and how I feel like is actually going to work with Havertz. I think we do have quite a good depth in terms of like our attacking midfielders. We've got Havertz, who's more like a second striker. We've got Odegaard, who's more like a playmaker, but a very direct player at the same time as well, as we're seeing now as in his development. And then we've got Fabio Vieira, who's more like a De Bruyne and a Bruno Fernandes kind of guy, that final action kind of player. We've seen he's got a great final ball, and we've got Fabio Vieira to be able to do that. So I feel like we've got great depth in our attacking midfielder in that 10 position already. So as long as we have Declan Rice being our defensive midfielder, we'll be able to play two out of these three guys in there and be able to, and we'll be able to understand that we can still have balance whilst having these two very offensive guys in there. But of course, I still feel like we do need to find another centre mid who, yes, someone like Zinchenko, but who can play in the final third and also support. Like, see what Gondon was doing, was supporting at the back, because especially in the Champions League, there's going to be games whereby your midfield, like, you can't just rely on Zinchenko drifting into from defense into midfield, because he could be exposed at the back there. So you can't always rely on that. And if you can't do that, then you want a midfielder to drop back to help support you build up play. And I feel like we still need to find someone who's going to be capable, who's more natural at doing that. And yeah, once we do find a profile like that, that would actually help us, because would end up having more depth in our midfield. We could have Havertz, we could have Odegaard, we have Fabio Vieira, and then we have this player that can help us to give us more quality and depth in that area of the pitch. So yeah, man, I feel like that, for me, those are the main things I wanted to talk about in terms of Odegaard's development, and how it affects Havertz, how it affects the team, and how we pretty much balance, and how the team as a whole brings balance to the team to allow these guys to play the way they're playing it, essentially. But yeah, man, that's the main thing about Odegaard for me.